Hey, it's Nathan. Before we start, I want you to think about the quietest person you know. Not shy, quiet. The one who listens all the way to the end of your sentence before he answers. In my experience, that man is almost never the least dangerous person in the room. He's usually the only one who knows exactly how dangerous the room is. Today's story is about a man whose entire profession was listening. He tuned pianos. For 14 years, his wife's family treated him like a hobby she'd married. The sweet, harmless guy with the felt strips and the little wrench. The one who took 40 minutes to say what everyone else said in 4. They made him the punchline of Sunday dinner. And they never once asked him what he did before he came home and picked up his father's trade. That's the part I want you to hold on to, because this story turns on one specific human failure, assuming that a soft voice means a soft man. There's real education in here about how professionals actually think about danger, not the movie version, the boring version, the version made of geometry and doors and habits. And there's a lesson about paper, about what happens when a man who writes everything down runs into a family that assumed nobody was keeping records. Stay to the end, because the thing that finally brings this whole house down isn't a gun, and it isn't the police. It's sound. Let's get into it. Jasper Vance had a rule about the last note. Whatever piano he was working on, whatever house he was in, whatever the weather was doing outside, when the tuning was finished, he played one note, middle C, not a chord, not a scrap of a song, one note, struck softly, and then he sat with his hands in his lap and listened to it die. Most clients thought it was a superstition. It wasn't. A dying note tells you everything a struck note hides. It tells you whether the soundboard is cracked, whether the bridge is lifting, whether there's a hairline separation somewhere in the case that will turn into $1,000 problem in 2 winters. A note going up is a performance. A note going down is a confession. He'd been listening to confessions for 14 years. He was 53, built like a man who'd once carried things for a living and never quite lost the shoulders for it. Gray at the temples. Hands that looked wrong for the job. Thick knuckles, a knot of scar tissue across the back of the left one. Until you watched them work, and then they looked like the only correct hands in the world. He lived in Kingsbridge, a river city of 90,000 that had been rich once and decided, around 1974, to stay dignified instead. 4 church organs, 1 concert hall, a Steinway in the lobby of every bank that wanted to look like it had been there a long time, and roughly 1,100 pianos in private homes across 3 counties. Jasper knew where every single one of them was, because he wrote it down. His father had taught him that. Wendell Vance had tuned pianos in Kingsbridge for 41 years, and kept a ledger for every one. And Jasper had inherited both the trade and the habit. In the back room of the house on Larkin Street, there were 38 hardbound ledgers. 23 were his father's. 15 were his. Every entry was the same shape: date, address, make, model, serial number, temperature and humidity, what he did, what he'd need to do next time, and at the bottom, in a hand so small it looked printed, whatever else he'd noticed. A window sash that leaked, a radiator too close to the case, a cat. 15 years, 4 to 6 entries a day, something like 19,000 handwritten records of exactly which piano was in exactly which room on exactly which date. Nobody had ever asked to see them. He'd assumed nobody ever would. He had married Corinne Halloran on a Saturday in October 14 years earlier, in a church whose organ he had voiced for free as a wedding present. She was a curriculum designer for the county school system, a tall, dry-humored woman who read 3 books at once and finished none of them, and she had fallen in love with him at a fundraiser, where he had spent an hour under a grand piano fixing a pedal rod with a paperclip, while a string quartet played 8 feet away. The Hallorans had not fallen in love with him. They were, in Kingsbridge terms, old, not rich the way people are rich now, rich the way families are rich when they've owned the same 3 warehouses since 1938. The Halloran name was on a hospital wing, a scholarship, and a foundation that gave away $400,000 a year and made sure everyone knew about it. Marguerite Halloran, 78, was the family the way a keystone is an arch. Beautiful manners, and a way of asking a question that made you feel measured. She had never been unkind to Jasper. She had simply, from the first handshake, filed him under. Corinne's husband, the tuner, and had never once opened the file to check. Her son Desmond was 51 and ran Halloran Keys and Cases. It had started as a piano-moving outfit in the 50s, back when every parlor had an upright and somebody had to get it up the stairs. Desmond had turned it into climate-controlled instrument storage, insured transport, white-glove logistics for orchestras and museums and estates, 61 employees, trucks with the crest on the side, contracts in 11 states. He had a good handshake, a great laugh, and a habit of saying your name too often. He wore watches that cost more than Jasper's car and made a point of not mentioning them. He had a wife named Juliet, who drank white wine like it was a job, and a 15-year-old son named Auden, who was the only Halloran who ever texted Jasper directly, usually to ask what a diminished chord was. At Sunday dinner, first Sunday of the month, Marguerite's dining room, no exceptions. Desmond would go around the table asking everyone what they'd been working on. He'd let his brother-in-law's answer sit for a beat and then say something like, "The Piano Man, Kingsbridge's last honest tradesman." And everyone would laugh, and it was almost affectionate, and it was never quite. Corinne had stopped correcting it around year 6. Jasper had never started. There was a reason for that, and the reason had a shape, and the shape was this. Jasper Vance did not enjoy being underestimated. He simply understood, in a way most people never have to learn, that being underestimated is not an insult. It's a position, and you don't give up a good position because someone hurt your feelings at dinner. Their daughter Imogen was 17 and was the actual musician in the family. She played like she was arguing with the instrument and winning. In 3 weeks, she had her senior recital at the Lyceum, the 1910 hall downtown, and she was working on a Rachmaninoff prelude that she was not quite ready for and refused to abandon. "It's too big for you," Jasper had told her. "I know." "Good. Keep it." That was the house on Larkin Street. A man who wrote things down, a woman who read 3 books at once, a girl arguing with a Steinway, and 38 ledgers on a shelf that nobody had ever asked about. On the second Sunday in March, at 9:41 in the evening, the iPad in the kitchen chimed. It was the family iPad, the one Imogen used for sheet music, propped in a stand next to the fruit bowl, logged into the shared account Marguerite had set up years ago so the whole extended family could share photos of grandchildren and calendar invitations to things nobody wanted to attend. Nobody had ever cleaned it up. Nobody had ever audited who was still on it. Jasper was at the counter, drying a pan, when it lit. He wasn't snooping. The message previews were on, the way they'd been on for 6 years, and the screen was 18 inches from his hand. It came up in the pale gray of a thread that had never appeared on that device before. 2 shooters. The parking garage. Tuesday. And under it, 4 seconds later. Half now, half when the piano man stops playing. Jasper Vance kept drying the pan. He turned it over, ran the towel along the rim, checked the handle, and set it in the rack. Then he folded the towel in thirds and hung it on the oven bar, the way he always did, and he stood there with his hands flat on the counter and read the 2 messages again. Upstairs, Imogen was fighting the Rachmaninoff. He could hear it through the floor. She kept rushing bar 19, kept getting punished for it, kept coming back. In the front room, Corinne turned a page. He had, at that moment, a very specific physical sensation. Not fear. Something older and more useful. Something he had not felt in 11 years and had honestly hoped he'd lost. A kind of narrowing. The world went very quiet and very wide at the same time. The way it used to. The first thing he did was nothing. That sounds like a failure of nerve. It isn't. It's the most expensive skill in the entire discipline, and it took him 9 years to learn it. When a threat surfaces, the amateur reacts, shouts, calls, runs, confronts. Every one of those gives information away, and information is the only currency that matters in the first hour. You have exactly one advantage when a plan is aimed at you. The planners don't know you've seen it. That advantage is a wasting asset. You spend it once. You never spend it on feeling better. So he stood at the counter and counted his own breathing until it came down, and read what was actually in front of him. 2 shooters. Plural. That's not a warning or a beating. That's redundancy, which means the outcome is required, which means somebody has a deadline. The parking garage, definite article, a specific one, known to both parties, requiring no clarification. Tuesday. 8 days out. Scheduled. Half now, half when. 50 up front, 50 on completion. That's a broker's language, not a friend's. The piano man. He read that phrase maybe 9 times. He'd heard it at every Sunday dinner for 14 years, in a voice with a laugh underneath it. Jasper picked up the iPad, and here he made the only decision of the night that mattered. He did not screenshot it. Screenshots on a shared account can sync. He did not forward it. He took out his own phone, an old model with no cloud backup, and photographed the screen. Then he opened settings, went to the account, and looked at the list of devices attached. There were 9. Marguerite's phone and iPad, Juliet's phone, Auden's laptop, Corinne's phone, Imogen's phone, the kitchen iPad, a Mac Mini in Marguerite's study that hadn't been powered on since 2019, and a 9th, listed as iPhone 7, added 4 months ago. Auden had gotten a new phone in November. Jasper remembered because the kid had complained about it for a full Sunday. His father had made him recycle the old one through the business instead of trading it in. Somebody had wiped that phone, put a new SIM in it, and started using it for messages they did not want on their own number. And because they had wiped it but never removed it from the family account, every message on it was landing in Marguerite Halloran's photo-sharing cloud like a letter dropped in the wrong mailbox. Jasper turned previews off for everything on the iPad and set it back in the stand exactly where it had been, at exactly the angle it had been, screen tipped 2 degrees toward the fruit bowl. If he could see those messages, so could Corinne, so could Imogen, and the first person in that house who reacted out loud was going to get everyone killed. Upstairs, the Rachmaninoff broke at bar 19 again. Jasper went up, knocked on the doorframe, and told his daughter she was rushing because she was afraid of the left hand. She said she wasn't afraid of anything. He said, "Good. Play it slower then." She played it slower. It worked. She said, "Huh," in the exact tone Corinne used, and he laughed. And then he went down the hall to the back room, closed the door, sat down in the chair he'd bought at an estate sale, and let himself understand what was happening. For 20 years before Kingsbridge, Jasper Vance had worked for a company called Farrand Advisory Group. On paper, it was a risk consulting firm with an office in Arlington and a mailbox in Geneva. In practice, it held a class of contract the State Department did not like to hold directly. Protective analysis for diplomatic facilities in places where the local security services were either unable to help or were themselves the problem. The job had a nickname inside the building, and the nickname was accurate. They called it counter-assassination. People hear that and picture a man on a roof. It was almost the exact opposite. Jasper had never been in a gunfight. In 20 years, he had drawn a weapon 4 times and fired it 0. His actual work, 11 hours a day in Bucharest and Amman and Lagos and Tbilisi, and 2 places he still wasn't supposed to name, was this. You go to the place where the protected person will be, and you plan their murder, thoroughly, professionally, with a budget and a team and no sentiment at all. You sit down with a floor plan and a stopwatch and you ask, if I wanted this person dead, and I had 4 men and $11,000, exactly how would I do it? You find every way. You rank them by ease. And then you close them, move the route, change the arrival door, fix the lighting, get the schedule off the internal calendar, make the predictable thing unpredictable. The rule of the trade, the one they printed on nothing and said out loud constantly, was, there are always 7 ways. You can close 6. The 7th is the one you don't find, and the whole discipline is really about making the 7th expensive enough that nobody bothers. Jasper had been very good at it, and he had a specialty, and the specialty was the reason he was sitting in a back room in Kingsbridge, Ohio, at 10:20 on a Sunday night, with 2 sentences photographed on his phone. His specialty was transit, not buildings. The buildings are easy. Buildings have doors you control. Transit, the soft 90 seconds between a controlled space and a vehicle. Lobbies, loading docks, service corridors, stairwells, and garages. He had spent 2 decades thinking about parking garages, because a garage is the most hostile piece of architecture a protected person can walk through. Concrete columns every 18 feet, cover for the attacker, blind spots for the detail. Fixed ramps, so the exit path is knowable. Predictable arrival times, because people park in the same place every day. terrible lighting maintained by whoever bid lowest, heavy fire doors that swallow sound, and overhead, a concrete slab over a concrete floor, which means the whole structure is a resonating box that scrambles the direction of any noise inside it. He had written 14 pages about that last point in 2011. Farron still used it. Somewhere in a training folder in Arlington there was a section called Vance, Acoustic Disorientation in Enclosed Reinforced Structures. And it was the most interesting thing he had ever done. He had come home in the summer of 2011 for a reason he did not talk about, and he had picked up his father's tuning lever, and he had spent 14 years being the piano man. Now somebody in his wife's family had bought 2 shooters and picked a garage. Jasper sat in the dark for a while. Then he opened the ledger for the current year, turned to a blank page at the back, and started a list. Not a list of suspects, he already knew, and knowing early is a trap he'd watched men fall into a dozen times. A list of things he did not know yet. Which garage? Whose deadline? Why now? Who else is on the contract? He looked at the 4th line for a long moment. He'd written it without deciding to. 20 years of habit. Because contracts like this almost never have one name on them, and the man who assumes he is the only target is the man who saves himself and buries his family. He underlined it twice. Then he went to bed, and lay next to his wife, and listened to her breathe, and did not sleep. And at 5:40 in the morning he got up, and made coffee, and drove out to Bethel Township to tune a 1968 Baldwin for a woman named Odile Fenwick, who always overpaid him by $20, and always pretended she'd made a mistake. He was exactly on time. He was on time all week. Being on time, that week, was the most aggressive thing he did. By Wednesday, Jasper had built the frame of it, and the frame was worse than he'd hoped. He worked the way he'd been trained to, slowly and on paper. No searches on his phone. No questions to anyone who might mention them. 3 tasks, in the order that produced the least noise. The first was the phone. He didn't need to break into it. He needed to prove whose thumb was on it. So on Monday afternoon, between a spinet in Rowan Heights and an upright at the Methodist Church, he sat in his car outside the Halloran Keys yard on Vernon Street and watched Desmond come out at 2:14 to smoke a cigarette he pretended not to smoke. Desmond had 2 phones. He talked on the black one for 6 minutes, put it in his jacket, took out a second one in a cheap blue silicone case with a scuffed corner. Auden's old case. Jasper had seen it 100 times at Sunday dinner, thumbed at it for 90 seconds, and went inside. At 2:19 that afternoon, 2 more messages landed in the wrong mailbox. Confirmed 2s, same as we discussed on the level, and the second name stays second. Do the second name after, not before, not in the same week. Jasper sat in his car in the cold with his hands on the wheel and read. The second name. 11 times. He had been right, and he took no satisfaction from it at all. The second task was the why, because that was the piece that made no sense. Desmond Halloran was not a violent man in any way Jasper had ever observed. He was a comfortable man. Comfortable men do not buy shooters unless something has walked up to the edge of their comfort and started tapping. So Jasper did what he'd have done in Tbilisi. He stopped thinking about the man and started thinking about the calendar. What had changed in 90 days? 3 things. In January, the Kingsbridge Cultural Trust had voted to buy the Lyceum's 1927 Steinway D from the estate that had loaned it for 60 years, and to conduct, in the language of the meeting minutes, a comprehensive inventory and valuation of all instruments held or transported under trust contracts. The trust's transport and storage contract had been held for 19 years by Halloran Keys and Cases. And on February 6th, a woman from the trust named Della Marchetti had left Jasper a voicemail he'd listened to once and filed under. Nice. We'll get to it. Asking whether he'd serve as technical authenticator for that inventory. Because, and she'd laughed a little when she said it, you're the only person in this county who could actually tell us where every one of these instruments has physically been. He had not called her back. Jasper sat with that. Then he went home, took the 15th ledger off the shelf, and started reading his own handwriting. It took 4 hours to find the first one. It took 20 minutes to find the next 6. Halloran Keys moved instruments. That was the whole business, and every leg of every journey generated a manifest. 1 Bosendorfer, 225, serial 34118, crated, 1,340 pounds, Kingsbridge to Erie, insured value $118,000. The manifests were how the company billed, how the insurance worked, and how the crates crossed state lines with the paperwork of high-value fine art instead of freight. And Jasper's ledgers said that some of those instruments had not moved. Not once. Not ever. On March 11, 2021, a manifest said that a Mason & Hamlin AA, serial 79204, went from the Lyceum's storage annex to a facility outside Pittsburgh. On March 12, 2021, Jasper Vance had tuned a Mason & Hamlin AA, serial 79204, in the Lyceum storage annex, at a relative humidity of 44%, and had noted that the third damper felt sluggish and he'd bring a spring next time. That instrument had never left the building, but a crate with its name on it had crossed 2 state lines with a bill of lading, an insurance rider, and a customs-grade seal. There were, when he finally stopped counting at 2 in the morning on Thursday, 31 of them across 6 years. 31 crates. 31 journeys. Every one of them documented as an instrument. Every one of them according to 19,000 handwritten records nobody had ever asked about, containing something else. Jasper closed the ledger and put both hands flat on it. He understood, now, why the deadline existed. Della Marchetti wanted him to authenticate an inventory. The moment he opened his own books next to Desmond's manifests, not maliciously, not as an accusation, just as a competent man doing a job he'd been asked to do, 6 years of Halloran Key's second business would come apart in a single afternoon. Not because of an investigation, because of a piano tuner's handwriting. Desmond didn't need Jasper to be suspicious. He needed Jasper to be unavailable. Half when the piano man stops playing. It wasn't a nickname anymore. It was a job description of a corpse. The third task was the worst one, and Jasper almost didn't do it. And then he did it because a man who stops looking when he finds the answer he wants isn't looking. He went to the library on Friday morning, public terminal, cash for the printing, and searched 6 years of the Kingsbridge Ledger Dispatch for Halloran Keys, gala photographs, a piece about the new climate vaults, a profile of Desmond headlined, "Keeping the Music Safe." And on page 9 of the August 19, 2019 edition, a 2-paragraph brief with no byline. A 22-year-old warehouse employee died Saturday at a Vernon Street facility in what authorities described as an industrial accident. Ellery Dunn of Kingsbridge was pronounced dead at the scene. A spokesman for Halloran Keys and Cases said the company was cooperating fully and had suspended crate operations pending review. No charges are expected. Jasper printed it, folded it twice, put it in his shirt pocket under the felt strips, and sat in the library parking lot for 11 minutes without starting the car. 22 years old. No charges are expected. He had learned a long time ago that the most reliable indicator of what a man will do next is what he has already done and gotten away with. Everything else, the manners, the handshake, the hospital wing, is decoration. A man who has crossed a line once has not crossed a line. He has moved it, and he will live behind the new one comfortably for the rest of his life. Desmond Halloran had moved his line in 2019. That was the moment Jasper stopped thinking of this as a family problem. That night he did the thing he'd been putting off since Sunday. He wrote out the second name, properly, on paper, the way he'd done 100 threat assessments. Who else, upon the death of Jasper Vance, becomes an exposure to Desmond Halloran? Not who would grieve, who would become dangerous. The answer took under a minute and it hollowed him out. The ledgers were in his house. His wife lived in that house. And Corinne's signature was on the Halloran Foundation's trust documents. She'd been a co-trustee since her father died, a ceremonial role she'd accepted in 2018 and joked about ever since, because twice a year it meant signing 40 pages she didn't read. If Jasper died, Corinne would inherit 38 ledgers, a grieving fog, and eventually, because she was the most methodical person he'd ever met, a question. Do the second name after, not before. Not in the same week. Jasper Vance sat in his back room, at 11 o'clock at night, and looked at his own handwriting spelling out his wife's name in a list of targets, and something in him that had been asleep since 2011 stood all the way up. He turned the page. At the top of the fresh sheet he wrote a single line, and it was not a threat and it was not a plan. It was a professional note, the kind he used to write in a hotel room at 4 in the morning, with a floor plan spread across the bed. They have chosen a garage. That is a gift, and they don't know it. There is a thing that happens to ordinary people when they learn someone wants them dead. Jasper had watched it happen to diplomats, to journalists, to a finance minister in Tbilisi who was one of the bravest men he'd ever met. They change everything. New routes, canceled appointments, a different coffee. They think they're being careful, and what they are actually doing is broadcasting, in the clearest possible language. I know. And the second the other side reads that broadcast, you lose the only thing you had. They stop planning for the man they've been watching for 3 weeks and start improvising against a man who is afraid. Improvisation is unpredictable. Unpredictable gets people killed. So on Saturday morning, Jasper Vance made himself into the most boring man in Ohio. He kept every appointment. He drove the same routes at the same times, stopped at the same gas station on Corliss, bought the same coffee, complained about the same weather to the same cashier. Home at 6:10, trash out Monday, the Baldwin, the 2 Spinets, the church upright, the Yamaha at Rowan Heights Middle School where the band director always tried to give him cookies, and on Tuesday, the first Tuesday, the one before, he did the thing he had done on the second Tuesday of every month for 11 years. He drove downtown at 6 in the evening, parked on level 3 of the 9th Street garage in the same corner spot he always took, walked across the Sky Bridge into the Corvain building, took the elevator to the 8th floor, and spent 2 hours tuning the Steinway B in the Corvain ballroom. He came out at 8:20. He drove home. He got there at 8:41. If anyone had been watching, and by then he was reasonably sure someone had been, for at least 11 days, they'd have logged the same entry they'd logged 4 times already. Second Tuesday, 9th Street garage, level 3, northeast corner, ballroom, out around 8:15, alone, windows down when it's not raining, because the ballroom is hot and he sweats through his shirt. That was the gift. They had not picked the garage because it was clever. They had picked it because he had picked it 11 years ago and had gone there on the second Tuesday of every month ever since, and had made himself so gorgeously predictable that a man who had never planned anything harder than a wine list could look at a calendar and feel like a professional. Jasper had spent 20 years teaching people not to do exactly what he'd been doing for 11. He didn't beat himself up about it. There's no such thing as a life without a pattern, only a life where you know what your pattern is. He knew, and now the pattern was the most useful thing he owned, because a plan built on a pattern belongs to whoever controls the pattern. The next second Tuesday was April 14th, and on April 14th, in the Corvain ballroom, 8 floors directly above the northeast corner of level 3, the Halloran Family Foundation was holding its annual spring benefit for the hospital. 300 guests, black tie, Desmond Halloran giving the closing remarks at 9. Jasper looked at that for a long time. Desmond hadn't picked a random Tuesday. He'd picked the one night of the year when he'd be standing in a lit room in front of 300 people, 2 county commissioners and a judge among them, at the exact moment his brother-in-law's body was found 8 floors below. It was, Jasper had to admit, a genuinely good alibi. It was the only professional thing about the entire operation, and it told him something. Desmond wasn't the planner. Desmond was the client. Someone competent had asked him, "Where will you be, and where will he be?" And built around the answer. There was a broker. Jasper found him in 4 days, and he found him through a man named Amos Teague. Amos was 66, had been the night attendant at the 9th Street garage for 19 years, and had a Chickering upright in his living room that Jasper had tuned for free since 2016, because Amos's late wife had played it, and Amos couldn't bear to let it go out of tune. They were not exactly friends. They were something better for this purpose. 2 men who had been quietly kind to each other for a decade without ever discussing it. Jasper told him nothing. He just asked about the garage, the way you ask a man about his work when you like him. What's changed? What's broken? What's driving him crazy? Amos talked for 40 minutes over eggs, and in 40 minutes, Jasper learned that the north bank of lights on levels 2 through 4 had been on a failing ballast since November and dropped out for an hour at a time, that the stairwell doors on levels 2 and 4 had closers out of adjustment for 2 years, so they didn't latch unless you pulled them, that the level 3 camera had been aimed at the southeast ramp since a fender-bender lawsuit in 2022 and covered 40% of the deck, and that on gala nights the garage ran valet on the bottom 2 levels and closed 3 and 4 with a chain and a folding sign. And that 3 weeks ago a man had come by claiming to be an insurance surveyor and asked about camera coverage and the closing schedule. Amos had thought he was rude. Amos had also written his plate number on the back of a parking stub because 19 years on nights teaches a man not to like questions from people who won't give a company name. Jasper looked at the parking stub for about 4 seconds. Then he said, "Amos, can I keep this?" "You can keep it if you tell me what's going on." "Not yet." Amos Teague looked at him across a plate of eggs, and something in the old man's face rearranged itself, and he said, "You've got a look my brother had in Korea." "I know." "All right." He pushed the stub across the table. "You need anything on the 14th? I'm on till 2. The plate came back, through Cassian Rhodes, who ran a locksmith and alarm shop on Delacroix Street, and who had been an entry specialist at Farrand for 9 years, before his knees gave out, and who had, when Jasper called him and said 4 sentences, gone completely silent for 6 seconds, and then said, "Tell me where and when." As belonging to a leased Chevrolet registered to a company called Slade Recovery Solutions. Corbin Slade, 58. Former bail enforcement, a repossession license, 2 dropped assault charges in Indiana, and a small, tidy reputation in a particular corner of the state as the man you call when you need a problem to be handled by people who don't know your name. He was the one who had chosen the 14th. He was the one who had chosen level 3. He was also, Jasper realized with a slow, cold clarity, the weakest joint in the entire structure, because Corbin Slade was the only person in this who was doing it for money, and men who are in it for money have a price at which they stop. "You need to go to the police," Cassian said. They were in the back of the shop on Delacroix, among a wall of key blanks, and Jasper had laid it out flat. The messages, the ledgers, the manifests, the dead kid in 2019, the second name. "I've thought about it more than you have," Jasper said. "Then think out loud, because from here, it looks like you're about to do something stupid, and I've watched you not do stupid things for 20 years. Jasper counted it off, and he was not being dramatic. He was being accurate. 1. What do I have? 2 texts on a family iPad, no sender name, from a device I can't prove is in Desmond's hand except that I watched him hold a blue phone case in a parking lot. That's not evidence. That's a story. 2. My ledgers are the real weapon, and they're the slowest weapon in the world. 31 discrepancies across 6 years, cross-referenced against manifests I don't have and can't subpoena. A detective takes that seriously in 6 months. I have 11 days. 3. He put his hand down. The moment a detective walks into Halloran Keys and says the word. Manifest. Desmond knows I've seen it, and then he doesn't cancel. He accelerates. And he doesn't come at me in a garage on a Tuesday, because that plan's dead. He comes at whatever's soft. And what's soft is a 17-year-old girl who walks 4 blocks to the Lyceum 3 afternoons a week to practice. Cassian didn't say anything. "I'm not refusing the police," Jasper said. "I'm refusing the order. Police second, not police never. So what's first? First I take the 14th away from him. How?" And Jasper Vance said the sentence Cassian Rhodes would repeat to his wife twice a year for the rest of his life. By showing up. Here is the part people get wrong about the trade. Everyone assumes the professional's instinct is to run, break the pattern, disappear, hotel, wait it out. Sometimes that's right, but running only works when a threat has a shelf life, and this one didn't. Desmond's exposure wasn't going away in a week or a year. The inventory was scheduled. The ledgers existed. Corinne's name was on the trust. A man in that position doesn't give up because he missed a Tuesday. He waits, and he tries again on a day. You didn't pick. You cannot win a war of patience against someone comfortable. You can only make one specific night so catastrophic for him that there is no second attempt. So don't dodge the ambush. Own it. Jasper started with a floor plan, because he always started with a floor plan. He pulled the garage's structural drawings from the county records office for $11, spread them on the workbench under the ledgers, and for the first time in 14 years did the thing he used to do for a living. He planned his own murder. Level 3 is a rectangle, 180 feet by 240. Cast-in-place concrete. 52 columns on an 18-foot grid. 2 vehicle ramps. 2 stairwell cores at the short ends. Core A north, Core B south. An elevator lobby, mid-west wall. Ceiling height 9 feet 2 inches, which is low, which matters more than anyone thinks. His car parked in the northeast corner, 6 spaces from Core A. He walked it Thursday afternoon like a man who'd forgotten where he'd parked, and he found the 7 ways in 20 minutes, which was fast, because a garage is generous. Shoot from the ramp, 90 feet, bad angle, on camera. Wait in the adjacent car. Take him at the driver's door from behind the column at 3J, 11 feet, nothing to it. That was the good one. Come down from level 4 through the elevator lobby and take him from the west while he's turned away. 2 men out of the Core A stairwell while he's at the trunk. The fire door is heavy and it makes a sound, but the sound comes out of a concrete box from everywhere at once, and by the time you turn to it they've closed 9 feet. Disable the car and take him with his head under the hood. The 7th was the one you don't find. There is always a 7th. Jasper stood at the trunk of his own wagon, turned in a slow circle, and then did the thing that made him different from every other man who has ever stood in a garage feeling hunted. He stopped asking how they'd do it. He started asking, what is this room actually made of? And the answer he had written 14 pages about in 2011, the answer that was sitting in a training folder in Arlington under his own name, was that a parking garage is not a room, it's an instrument. 180 by 240 feet of parallel concrete surfaces, 9 feet 2 inches apart, with 52 hard cylindrical columns in a regular grid, and no soft material anywhere except the cars. Reverberation time in a structure like that runs 3-4 seconds at low frequencies. There is essentially no absorption below 500 Hz. Sound doesn't travel through it. It fills it, which means the single most reliable human faculty in a dark, threatening space, the ability to turn your head toward a sound and know where it came from, does not work in there. We localize sound with 2 cues, the fraction of a millisecond by which it reaches one ear first, and the fact that it's slightly louder in the near ear. Both depend on the sound arriving from one direction. In a hard parallel-walled box, you don't get one arrival. You get the direct sound plus dozens of reflections of nearly equal strength from every surface within milliseconds of each other, and the 2 cues cancel into mush. And at specific frequencies, set by the room's dimensions, you get standing waves. Pressure maxima and minima locked in fixed positions in space. Stand in one spot and the tone is deafening. Take 4 steps and it nearly vanishes. 4 more and it's deafening again. And it is coming, as far as your entire nervous system is concerned, from inside your own skull. You cannot walk toward it. There is no toward. Jasper Vance had spent 20 years learning why that was a catastrophic vulnerability for a protected person. He had spent 14 years since learning, in the most intimate way a human being can, exactly how to generate and control tone. Standing in the northeast corner of Level 3 on a Thursday afternoon in March, holding his keys, a 53-year-old piano tuner in a canvas jacket understood that for the first time in his life, both halves of him were about to be in the same room. He built it over 9 days, in the hours between appointments, and he built it the way he'd been taught, cheap, reversible, and boring. Nothing he used was illegal to own. That was a hard rule and he never broke it. Every object involved could be found in the back of a piano technician's vehicle or on a hardware store shelf, and that wasn't luck, it was the design philosophy. A plan that requires you to acquire something suspicious is a plan that leaves a receipt. The sound, 8 surface transducers, the flat exciter pucks that turn any rigid panel into a loudspeaker. Technicians use them for practice rooms and soundboard diagnostics. Jasper had 4 and bought 4 more on an invoice that said, Soundboard testing, shop. Each one stuck with removable putty to the flat face of a concrete column at head height, each fed by a Bluetooth amplifier the size of a deck of cards on its own battery pack, all 8 slaved to a single transmitter. Placement took 3 evenings. He walked the deck with a tone generator and a sound level meter he'd owned since 2009, found the nodes and antinodes at 63 Hz, at 84, at 112, and marked them in chalk that would wash off. Column 3D, 3G, 4B, 4K. The 2 flanking Core A. The 2 by the elevator lobby. The material. This was the part he thought about longest, and the part he was, in a private and slightly ashamed way, proud of. He did not use noise. Noise reads as an alarm, and an alarm makes people leave. He recorded himself tuning. On the Friday before, alone in the Corvain ballroom, he set his phone on the music desk of the Steinway B and worked for 50 minutes and recorded all of it, the flat single strikes, the same note over and over, 2 strings beating slowly into unison and out, the pause, the strike, the pause. Then he took it home and layered it, the tuning pass at pitch, and underneath it, the same pass dropped 4 octaves, so the fundamentals sat at 63 and 84 and 112, right where the room would take them and hold them and multiply them. Played back on 8 transducers stuck to a concrete box, it would not sound like a recording. It would sound like the building itself was being tuned. It would come from every column at once and from none of them, and it would rise through the soles of your shoes. And in the middle of it, at normal pitch, perfectly clear and perfectly locatable sounding, and completely, deliberately false, a man playing middle C, softly, once every 11 seconds. From nowhere, the light. He did not touch the wiring. That would have been a crime and he didn't need to. The north ballast circuit dropped out on its own, and the contractor's own service log, a public record, documented 17 failures since November. All Jasper added was a $14 plug-in space heater in the janitor's outlet on level 2, which, run for 40 minutes on a circuit already failing, would do what it had already done 17 times. The north half of level 3 would go dark. The south half, ramp, camera, valet stand, would stay lit. If you were coming to kill a man in the northeast corner, you would come in the dark, because you would think the dark was yours. The doors. 2 rubber wedges, the kind movers use, in the Core B doors on levels 2 and 4, the ones whose closers had been out of adjustment for 2 years, wedged open from the stair side at 750, which meant that if you were in the north stairwell in the dark and needed to leave fast, the only door that would give was the one that put you out on the south side, in the light, on camera, 40 feet from the valet stand. He wasn't building a trap to hurt anyone. He was building a funnel, the record. 6 copies of everything. The photographs of the messages. Scans of the 31 ledger entries against the manifest dates. The clipping about Ellery Dunn. And 22 pages he wrote himself in the plainest English he could manage. Because he'd learned in Arlington that the most persuasive document in the world is one a tired person can understand at 11 at night. One to Cassian Rhodes. One in a safe deposit box in Erie. One mailed to himself, certified, unopened. One sealed with Della Marchetti at the trust, with a note that said, "If I don't call you by April 15th, open this." One on a dead man switch set for the 15th, addressed to the Ohio Attorney General and the Ledger Dispatch. And a 6th he did not distribute. He put it in a padded envelope in the trunk of his wagon, under the spare. And this was the only part of the plan that was purely emotional, and he knew it. It was for whoever opened that trunk if he was wrong. The police. On the Wednesday before, he went to see Detective Yolanda Pruitt. He picked her deliberately. 11 years in, one of 2 detectives in the county who'd worked financial crimes, and, the part that mattered, the officer whose name was on the 2019 incident report for Ellery Dunn. She'd been a patrol sergeant then. She had written 4 pages on a 2-paragraph accident. He gave her everything except the messages, and he did not tell her about April 14th, and he was straight with her about why. "I'm not asking you to protect me," he said. "I'm asking you to read this before the 15th. Pruitt looked at him across her desk for a while. She had a face built for exactly this. "Mr. Vance, is somebody going to get hurt?" "Not by me." "That's a hell of an answer." "It's the true one." She flipped to the ledger scans. She read 4 of them. Then she went back and read the first one again, slower, and he watched a very specific thing happen behind her eyes. The thing that happens when a professional recognizes that the boring document in front of them is not boring. This is your handwriting? Since 2011. Every day? 4 to 6 a day. Yolanda Pruitt sat back in her chair. I've been doing this 11 years, she said, and I have never once had somebody walk in here with a paper trail that predates the crime by 6 years and was made by accident. It wasn't an accident, Jasper said. It was a habit. That's better. He got up to go, and she said his name, and he turned around. Whatever it is you're not telling me, she said. I'd like it to be on a Tuesday, when I'm on shift. Jasper Vance almost smiled. I'll see what I can do. He came home on the Thursday before the 14th, and Corinne was sitting at the kitchen table with 2 rubber door wedges, a chalk marker, and a sound level meter laid out in front of her like a hand of cards. She'd been looking for the extension cord. She didn't say anything when he came in. She let him take his coat off and set his satchel down and pour a glass of water and drink half of it, and then she said, in a completely level voice, 14 years. I need you to tell me what you actually did for the 20 before. He told her. Not the sanded down version. He sat across from his own wife at his own kitchen table and told her about Ferrand and Arlington and the 20 years, about what counter-assassination actually means and how boring it actually is. He told her about Bucharest in 2011, the 11 weeks he spent closing every route into a residence, and a 19-year-old local driver named Soren, who was on nobody's protection list because he was nobody's principal, and who took the car out on an errand. Nobody logged and died in the 7th way. He told her he'd come home that summer and picked up his father's lever because he wanted a job where the worst thing he could get wrong was a piano. Corinne listened to all of it without moving. Then he put his phone on the table with the photograph of the 2 messages on it and slid it across, and watched her read her brother's plan for her husband's murder in 11 words, and watched her not cry, which was worse. When, she said. Tuesday, the gala. How long have you known? 26 days. Corinne Vance stood up. She walked to the sink. She stood there with her back to him and her hands on the edge of it, the same posture he'd been in the night it started, which he noticed and would remember for the rest of his life. And she said, 26 days. You sat at my table for 26 days. Yes. You let me call my mother about the flowers for the gala. Yes. Why? And he told her the truth, which he had promised himself he would do if she ever asked. Because you're a bad liar, and I love that about you. And if you had known on day 1, he would have known by day 3, and then the plan changes to something I can't see coming. I needed him to keep the plan he had. She turned around. Her face was doing 4 things at once. You used me. I used your ordinariness. It's not the same thing, but I understand if it feels like it. Don't be precise. With me right now, Jasper. There's a second name on it. That stopped her. He didn't dress it up. He walked her through it exactly as he'd worked it out. The ledgers in the house, her co-trustee's signature, the manifests, the phrase. Do the second name after, not before, not in the same week. And he watched his wife of 14 years understand that her brother had planned her death as a scheduling problem. She sat back down. She was very still for a long time. Ellery Dunn, she said finally. You said 2019, 22 years old. I remember the flowers. Her voice had gone strange and flat. I remember my mother arranging the flowers for that boy's funeral. She spent an hour on the phone about the flowers. She put her hands flat on the table. What do you need me to do? Jasper said. Nothing. Take Imogen to your cousins in Erie on Monday. Both of you stay until Wednesday, and let me. Ask me again, Corinne said. And this time, don't decide for me. There are moments in a marriage that are a hinge, and Jasper Vance was smart enough to recognize one when it was sitting across a kitchen table looking at him. Sunday, he said. Your mother's pre-gala dinner. I need to know one thing and I can't be the one to ask it. What thing? Whether she knows. Corinne Halloran Vance went to her mother's house on Sunday, April 12th, with a recorder the size of a car key in the front pocket of her bag. Legal in Ohio, where one party's consent is enough, which Jasper had confirmed twice with a lawyer he paid $400 for 11 minutes. Jasper did not go. He had a Sunday appointment in Bethel Township. He kept it. She came home at 9:20 and did not take her coat off. They listened in the back room with the door closed. 40 minutes in, after the seating chart and the caterer and Juliet asking twice whether the hospital board chair was coming, there was a stretch of clatter where people got up from the table, and then Corinne's voice, close to the mic. "Mom, can I ask you something weird?" "Always." "Does Desmond ever talk to you about Jasper?" A pause. Cutlery. "Why on earth would he?" "Because Jasper got asked to do the trust's instrument inventory," Della Marchetti called him. "And Des got very quiet at Christmas when it came up, and I've been wondering if there's something with the contract I should know about, as a trustee." Another pause. Longer. And then Marguerite Halloran, 78 years old, in the voice she used for the hospital board. "Corinne, sweetheart, there are parts of that company your brother has handled since your father died, and the reason he has handled them is so that nobody else has to. You signed those pages because I asked you to. Now, I would like you to stop asking Della Marchetti's name in my dining room." That's not an answer. It is the only one I've got, and it's a good one. Mom, if somebody did something, then it was done for this family. A chair moved. Your husband is a lovely man, and he does not understand what it costs to keep 300 people employed and a name on a hospital. He tunes pianos, darling. He has never had to decide anything. Right. The family will be fine. It always is. Now help me with the chairs. The recording ran another 12 minutes. Nobody said anything else that mattered. Jasper reached over and stopped it. Corinne was crying now, finally, in a way that had nothing to do with fear. "She doesn't know about the shooters," Jasper said quietly. "I want you to hear that. I listened to it twice. She doesn't know about Tuesday. She knows about the boy. Yes, she knows about the crates. She knows enough to have decided not to know the rest. That's a choice, and she's been making it for 6 years, and on Tuesday she's going to find out what it bought her." He put his hand over his wife's. "Corinne, listen to me. Nothing that happens on Tuesday is going to be a surprise to anyone who deserves better." She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "What time?" 8:14, he said. "Give or take. How do you know that?" "Because that's when I'd do it." On Monday, Corinne drove Imogen to Erie. Imogen complained the entire way about missing 2 practice days before the recital. Corinne let her complain. At a gas station outside Ashtabula, she went into the bathroom and stood with her hands on the sink for 4 minutes, and then came out and bought her daughter a bag of pretzels and drove the rest of the way telling a very long story about a curriculum meeting. On Monday night at 11:40, Jasper Vance drove to the 9th Street garage, went up to level 3, and put 8 surface transducers on 8 concrete columns with removable putty, and 8 battery packs on 8 ledges, and turned them all off. He drove home. He slept 5 hours, which surprised him. Tuesday, April 14th, he tuned 3 pianos. A Spinet in Rowan Heights at 9. A 1972 Yamaha U1 at the Methodist Church at 11:30. A Kawai in a dentist's waiting room at 2, where the receptionist asked him if he was okay because he looked tired, and he said allergies. He ate a sandwich in his car at 4. At 5:15, he called Detective Yolanda Pruitt's desk line and left a voicemail that was 19 seconds long. "This is Jasper Vance. You said Tuesday. 9th Street Garage, Level 3, from about 7:45. I'm not asking you to be there. I'm telling you where I'll be. Everything I gave you last week is real." At 5:31, he plugged a $14 space heater into the janitor's outlet on Level 2 and turned it to high. At 5:44, he wedged the Core B stairwell doors on Levels 2 and 4. At 6:02, he parked his 9-year-old wagon in the northeast corner of Level 3, 6 spaces from Core A, in the same spot he had parked on the second Tuesday of every month for 11 years. He rolled all 4 windows down, because the ballroom is hot, and he sweats through his shirt. At 6:09, he walked across the sky bridge into the Corvain building with his satchel over his shoulder, and rode the elevator to 8, and let himself into the ballroom through the service door, and spent an hour and 40 minutes tuning a Steinway B while 300 chairs were set around him and a florist argued with a caterer about a table. He did a good job. He always did. At 7:48, he packed his felt and his mutes and his lever, and stood for a second at the keyboard, and played middle C, and listened to it die. Clean. No lift in the bridge. The old girl would hold through the whole gala. Then he walked out through the service corridor, past the AV closet on the 8th floor, where, 90 minutes earlier, between the second octave and the third, he had spent 4 unhurried minutes doing something with a small transmitter and a cable that he had thought about for 9 days. And he took the sky bridge back across, and he went down the stair to level 3. The north half of the deck was dark. Jasper Vance stood in the dark by the trunk of his own car with his hands loose at his sides and let his eyes adjust, and he thought, the way you think a stray thought at a moment like that, about his father, about Wendell Vance saying, over a soundboard, "You don't chase the note, son. You wait for it to come to you." At 8:02, he took a small transmitter out of his jacket and put it on the roof of his car. At 8:06, he opened the driver's door, sat halfway in with one foot on the concrete, and did not close it. At 8:11, the elevator lobby light on the west wall flickered and steadied. At 8:14, the Core A stairwell door opened. It made the sound a heavy fire door makes in a concrete box, a flat metallic clap that arrived from the north, from the south, from directly overhead, and from somewhere behind his own sternum, all at the same instant. 2 men came out. Jasper did not turn around. He reached out with his right hand, very calmly, and pressed a button on the transmitter on the roof of his car. And the building started to tune. It came out of 8 columns at once at 63 hertz, and level 3 of the 9th Street garage, 180 by 240 feet of parallel concrete with nothing soft in it, did what it had been built, entirely by accident, to do. It took the tone and held it and multiplied it and set up a standing wave across the whole deck, and the pressure of it arrived not as a sound but as a physical fact, a low, enormous hum that came up through the floor slab into the soles of 2 pairs of boots and sat in 2 rib cages like a hand. Merrick Denning, who was 41 and had done 11 of these and had never once been frightened at work, stopped walking after 3 steps. Rowley Fisk, who was behind him and to the left, said something. Denning could see his mouth move. He could not tell, from the sound, whether Fisk was behind him or in front of him or on the level above. Then the second layer came in at 84 hertz, and the third at 112, and the intervals between them started to beat. That slow, throbbing pulse 2 slightly out-of-tune strings make, the sound a tuner spends his whole life listening for, at a scale of 40,000 cubic feet. And on top of all of it, at normal pitch, sweet and clear and close enough to touch, a single piano note, middle C, struck softly. Denning turned toward it. There was nothing there. There was a concrete column. 11 seconds later it came again, and he turned again, and it was somewhere else. And it was not somewhere else, because in a room like that there is no somewhere else. There is only everywhere. And your 2 ears, which have spent your entire life being right about this, are now lying to you at a rate of 200 lies a second. Here is what nobody tells you about acoustic disorientation. It does not feel like confusion. It feels like wrongness. It bypasses the part of the brain that reasons and lands directly in the part that is 900,000 years old and knows that a sound with no direction means the thing making it is already behind you. Trained men have walked out of rooms like that. Trained men have sat down on the floor. Rowley Fisk backed into a car and set off its alarm, and the alarm, a bright, clean, locatable, ordinary sound, was so overwhelmingly directional. Compared to everything else that both men turned to it like drowning men, and in the 4 seconds they were looking the wrong way, the north bank of lights on level 3 did the thing it had done 17 times since November. Everything went black. What happened next took 91 seconds, and Jasper Vance did not enjoy a single one of them. He had not built a trap to hurt them. He had built a room in which 2 armed men could not aim, could not communicate, could not locate each other, and could not find the exit they came in through, because Core A's door had swung shut behind them. And it was flat and dark and identical to 80 feet of flat, dark wall. And the only light on that entire level was the glow of the south deck 200 feet away, past the ramp, in front of the camera. They ran for the light. Of course they did. Everything with eyes runs for the light. Merrick Denning got 11 feet. Jasper took him at the third column from the corner, out of the dark, from an angle Denning could not have anticipated because Denning did not know there was an angle. It was not a fight. Jasper Vance had never been in a fight in his life, in the sense people mean. What he had was 20 years of instruction in exactly how a body is arranged and precisely which 4 inches of a man's arm you take to make his hand stop being a hand, and he was 53 years old, and he was faster than Denning for 1.5 seconds, which is all anyone needs. The pistol went across the concrete. It made a sound like a coin in a well, from everywhere. Rowley Fisk heard nothing at all. Fisk was 40 feet away in the black, walking with his free hand out in front of him like a man in his own house at night. And when the hand touched a jacket, he said, "Merrick?" And Jasper said, very quietly, from 8 inches away, "No." Fisk swung. Fisk swung at where a voice had come from, in a room where that is the single stupidest thing a human being can do. And he hit a concrete column with enough force to break the 4th metacarpal of his right hand, and he sat down. Jasper zip-tied both of them. He had bought the zip ties at a hardware store on Delacroix with cash, and had thought about that purchase for a long time, and had decided that a man is allowed to own zip ties, and he collected 2 pistols by the barrel with a rag, and put them in a plastic bin in his trunk and closed it. Then he turned the transducers down to almost nothing. The building stopped tuning. What was left was a low, warm hum, like a held pedal, and under it the sound of 2 men breathing hard. Jasper crouched down in front of Merrick Denning, and he was not gloating, and his voice was the same voice he used to tell a client their soundboard was cracked. "You're not hurt," he said. "That's on purpose. I want you to understand that everything that just happened to you was a decision somebody else made, and it was a bad one, and it wasn't yours." Denning stared at the dark where the voice was. "What was that?" "Physics," Jasper said. "Where's your phone?" At 8:16 and 40 seconds, Jasper Vance took a phone out of Merrick Denning's jacket and pressed the man's thumb to the back of it and set the passcode requirement aside and looked at a contact list with 4 names in it. The one he wanted was saved as client. At 8:17, in the Corvain ballroom on the 8th floor of the Corvain building, with a glass of champagne he had not touched and 300 people at 40 tables and the string trio playing something inoffensive behind him, Desmond Halloran's phone buzzed in the inside pocket of his dinner jacket. He looked at it. He was standing with the hospital board chair and a county commissioner. He excused himself with a smile and a hand on the commissioner's shoulder and walked 11 steps to the corridor by the coat check and answered it and said, low and fast, "Tell me it's done." And a voice he had heard at Sunday dinner for 14 years said, "Hello, Desmond." There was a silence on that line that people at the coat check would later say they could feel. "It's Jasper. I'm on level 3. Your men are on the ground, and they're both breathing, which I'd like you to notice, because it means the worst thing that's happened tonight is still something you did, and not something I did." A pause. "Don't hang up. I'm going to explain why." Desmond Halloran did not hang up. Merrick Denning and Rowley Fisk came out of the north stairwell at 8:14. Corbin Slade drove them, and he's parked on Charlotte Street facing east, which is a mistake, because that's a one-way, and he'd have had to turn across traffic. Slade took your money on the 28th of March. He also took a call from me on Sunday, and I'd like you to sit with what that means for a second. You, Desmond's voice had gone somewhere thin. Jasper, whatever you think you, 31 crates, Jasper said. 6 years. Every one of them shipped under an instrument manifest with a serial number on it, and every one of those instruments was physically in a room in this county on the day it was supposedly in a truck, and I know that because I tuned them. I wrote it down. I write everything down, Desmond, 4 to 6 a day, in pen, since 2011. 19,000 entries. You didn't have a bookkeeping problem. You had a witness who didn't know he was one, and instead of asking him a question, you priced him. Where's Corinne? And that, more than anything else that night, was the moment Jasper's voice changed. Eerie, he said, with our daughter, because you wrote. Do the second name after, not before, not in the same week. And I read it, and I have never in my life wanted so badly to be wrong about something. That's not. Desmond, I'm going to tell you 2 more things, and then I'm going to stop talking, and I want you to listen, because you have about 90 seconds to decide what kind of the rest of your life you're going to have. The first thing is Ellery Dunn. Nothing on the line. 22. August of 2019. The report says a crate came off a lift. Detective Yolanda Pruitt wrote 4 pages on a 2-paragraph accident, and I think that's because she didn't believe it then either, and she's had my file for 8 days, and she's parked on 9th Street right now. The second thing is that this call has been open the whole time. Desmond Halloran said, "What? You're on with Detective Pruitt. You're on with Cassian Rhodes, who's recording. You're on with Della Marchetti from the Cultural Trust. You're on with a reporter from the Ledger-Dispatch named Truett Kinsale, who's been sitting on a sealed envelope with my name on it since Thursday. You're on with Winnie Dunn, who is Ellery's mother, and who agreed to sit in her kitchen tonight and listen to a phone, and who has not made a sound in 6 minutes. And you're on with your sister." The string trio finished a piece. Somebody applauded. "Corinne is in the car outside her cousin's house in Erie, with the phone on the dashboard," Jasper said. "And she has heard every word you've said to me since you picked up, starting with, 'Tell me it's done.'" Desmond Halloran leaned against the wall by the coat check in a rented tuxedo and did not say anything at all. "Here's the last part," Jasper said. "And then I'm done, and I'm going to go sit on the hood of my car and wait for the police, because that's how this ends for me. Sitting down, with my hands where they can see them. You picked tonight because you wanted 300 witnesses. You've got them." And then Jasper Vance reached over and turned a small dial. 8 floors up, in the Corvain ballroom, through a house system that ran out of an AV closet on the 8th floor. A closet Jasper had walked past every second Tuesday for 11 years, and had spent 4 unhurried minutes in earlier that evening with a transmitter and a cable, connecting a line-level input that any hall's audio tech could have found in 9 seconds and that nobody was looking for, the trio's inoffensive something cut out mid-phrase. And into a black-tie room of 300 people, over the same speakers that had welcomed them, at conversational volume and with perfect clarity. "Tell me it's done." The room did not go quiet all at once. That's not how rooms work. It went quiet in a wave, table by table, from the speakers outward, and by the time it reached the back, it was the most complete silence that building had held in a century. "Hello, Desmond." Marguerite Halloran was at table 1, 3 feet from the podium where her son was scheduled to speak in 40 minutes, with a program in her lap. She listened to the whole thing. She listened to 31 crates. She listened to "You had a witness, and instead of asking him a question, you priced him." She listened to her son say, "Where's Corinne?" in a voice she had not heard since he was 9, and she listened to a piano tuner say the name Ellery Dunn out loud in front of 300 people, 2 county commissioners, a judge, the hospital board, and a reporter from the Ledger-Dispatch who had stood up at table 19 and was writing so fast he tore the program. Somewhere around the 4th minute, Marguerite Halloran put the program down on the table and folded her hands on top of it, and did not move again until the police came in. Detective Yolanda Pruitt came up the north stairwell at 8:31 with 4 uniformed officers, and found the level dark on one side and lit on the other. 2 men zip-tied against a concrete column, 2 pistols in a plastic bin, and a 53-year-old man sitting on the hood of a 9-year-old wagon with his hands flat on his knees and his palms turned up. "Mr. Vance, you want to tell me what I'm looking at?" Jasper nodded at the columns. 8 speakers, held on with putty. "I'll take them off. They're mine, they're legal, and I'll tell you exactly what I did with them and when. Everything else in this building tonight was done by other people, and it's all on tape." Pruitt looked at the dark half of the deck for a long moment. "What'd you do to the lights?" "Nothing. The city's contractor has a service log with 17 entries since November. I ran a space heater on level 2. He almost smiled. "You can charge me for the electricity." Corbin Slade was picked up on Charlotte Street at 8:39, facing east on a one-way, exactly as advertised. He had in fact taken a call on Sunday, and he had not warned his client about it, because Jasper had asked him for nothing except this: "Keep the schedule, take the money, and remember that the only man in the operation with no exposure to a murder charge is the one who can say he thought it was a scare job." Slade had spent 48 hours understanding that sentence. His statement that night ran 90 minutes. Merrick Denning and Rowley Fisk both talked before midnight, separately, fast, and to the same story. which is the only kind a prosecutor actually wants. Desmond Halloran was arrested in the corridor by the coat check at 8:44 p.m., in a tuxedo, in front of the people whose good opinion had been the entire architecture of his life. The Ledger-Dispatch ran it on the front page for 9 consecutive days. The rest took 18 months, because the rest always does. The manifests came apart first, and they came apart exactly the way Jasper had said they would. Not in a dramatic courtroom moment, but in a windowless county office, where 2 forensic accountants and 1 very happy detective laid 31 bills of lading beside 31 photocopied ledger pages in a piano tuner's small, precise handwriting. What had been in the crates turned out to be, over 6 years, a rotating inventory of things that needed to cross state lines with the paperwork of insured fine art, unprovenanced antiquities out of 2 private collections, 411 kilograms of undeclared bullion for 3 clients who each believed they were the only one, and, for the last 2 years, because the line always moves, cash for people who did not explain where it came from. Halloran Keys and Cases went into receivership in November. 51 of its 61 employees were hired within 4 months by the 2 competitors who took the routes, in large part because Jasper wrote a letter to both saying the movers had never known and were the best crews in 3 states, which was true and cost him nothing, and which he did anyway. Ellery Dunn's death was reopened on the 4th day. It took 14 months and a warehouse foreman named Barnaby Grote, who had been carrying it since 2019 and cried in the interview room for 11 minutes before he said one useful word. The boy had opened a crate. The finding of accidental death was vacated. Desmond Halloran was convicted on 2 counts of conspiracy to commit murder, 1 count of involuntary manslaughter, and 19 federal counts related to the shipments, and the sentence was 31 years, a number the Ledger-Dispatch noticed matched the number of crates and could not resist putting in the ledet. Marguerite Halloran was never charged. The county attorney looked hard at obstruction and decided no jury would convict a 78-year-old woman on inference, and Jasper, asked formally in a conference room what he wanted, said he wanted whatever was true and nothing extra. She sold the house on Ellsworth Circle in the spring. The Halloran name came off the hospital wing in June. The plaque says, Kingsbridge Community Wing. Now, which nobody notices, which is the point. She wrote Corinne a letter in August. Corinne read it twice, put it in a drawer, and has not answered it, and Jasper has never once asked her to. Winnie Dunn came to the house on Larkin Street in October. She sat in the kitchen for 2 hours and brought a photograph of her son at 19 in a Halloran Keys polo shirt, grinning, holding one end of a piano. She wanted to know one thing, and she asked it 4 different ways before she got it out plain. Whether Ellery had known, at the end, that somebody would eventually find out. Jasper said no. He said the boy hadn't known that, and he wasn't going to pretend otherwise, and that he was sorry. Then he said the only useful thing he had. He opened the crate. Nobody asked him to. He didn't have to. He was 22, and he saw something wrong, and he put his hands on it. That's who he was on the last day. 6 years of paperwork couldn't get rid of him. Winnie Dunn cried at the kitchen table for a while, and then she asked if she could hear the piano. Imogen Vance played her senior recital at the Lyceum, 11 days after her uncle's arrest, earlier than anyone thought she'd manage, later than she wanted. She played the Rachmaninoff. She did not rush bar 19. Her father tuned the Steinway D that afternoon, the 1927 D the trust had bought, the instrument that had started all of it, on that stage since Coolidge was president. He worked 3 hours. Della Marchetti stood at the back for the last 20 minutes and told him afterward she'd never seen anyone concentrate that hard on anything, and he said it was an old piano and it deserved it. When he was done, he sat on the bench in the empty hall with 2,000 seats behind him and did what he always does. He played one note, middle C, softly, and then he put his hands in his lap and listened to it die all the way down, in a room built out of horsehair plaster and wood and velvet, a room designed by people who understood that the whole art of a space is what it does with a sound when the sound is over. And it went out clean and long and warm and true, with nothing wrong in it anywhere, in a building that was, in every way that mattered, the exact opposite of a parking garage. He sat there a while longer. Then he got up and packed his felt and his mutes and his lever, and went home, and had dinner with his wife and his daughter, and wrote the day down in the ledger. So that's Jasper Vance. And I want to be honest about which part I keep coming back to, because it isn't the garage, it's the ledger. 19,000 entries, 15 years of a man writing down the humidity and the serial number, and the fact that a client's cat sleeps inside the case 4 to 6 times a day for a reason that was basically, my father did it. Nobody asked for it. It wasn't evidence, it wasn't insurance, it wasn't leverage. It was a habit, and boring is exactly why it worked. Because you cannot fake a document created for no reason over 6 years by a man who had no idea what he was documenting. Desmond was so busy managing what people thought that he never once considered what somebody had quietly recorded. The second thing I keep chewing on is the underestimation, and I want to be careful, because the easy version of that lesson is, the quiet guy is secretly a badass, and that's a movie, and movies aren't useful. The real version is colder. Desmond didn't lose because he underestimated Jasper's skills. He lost because he underestimated Jasper's skills. He lost because he underestimated Jasper's skills. Patience. 26 days of drying pans and tuning spinets and saying good morning, letting a man who wanted him dead go on believing he was winning. Most of us can't do 4 hours of that. And it wasn't a personality trait. It was a decision he made at a kitchen counter in the first 90 seconds, when everything in his body was screaming at him to do something. And he chose to do nothing, and to do it perfectly. And the last thing, Jasper didn't outfight those 2 men. He beat the room. He noticed, years before he needed it, that a parking garage is a badly built instrument, and then he spent 14 years in the only trade on earth that would teach him what to do about that. There's something in that for all of us. Whatever the thing is that you're good at, the boring thing, the thing nobody in your family takes seriously, the thing that makes you the punchline at dinner, that's not your hobby. That's your ground. And someday somebody is going to pick a fight with you on it and have no idea what they've walked into. Write things down. Don't react in the first hour. And never tell a man he's harmless just because he's quiet. I'm Nathan. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next story.